Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from our frontier. Thank you for stopping by. It was a really misty morning and I took this photograph of up a hill. You can barely see the buildings in the mist. And this morning I was dropping the two girls to the bus pickup, and I asked Layla to talk to me about the short stories she was studying as we drove. Hannah piped up saying, "We're studying the scramble for Africa," and I said to Hannah, "Look, we'll get to that momentarily as well." Layla told me the three books she was reading were Raymond Carver's Elephant, which I'd read. I'd prefer some of his other short stories, but I have read that. A book by Saki called Shreddy Vashta, and I had never read this, and then she described it to me very powerfully. But let me read you a review. Conradin was 10 years old, and the doctor had pronounced his professional opinion that the boy would not live another 5 years. The doctor was silky and effete and counted for little, but his opinion was endorsed by Mrs. de Ropp, who counted for nearly everything. Mrs. de Ropp was Conradin's cousin and guardian, and in his eyes she represented those 3/5 of the world that are necessary and disagreeable and real. The other 2/5, in perpetual antagonism to the foregoing, were summed up in himself and his imagination. One of these days Conradin supposed he would succumb to the mastering pressure of wearisome necessary things such as illnesses and coddling restrictions and drawn-out dullness, without his imagination, which was rampant under the spur of loneliness. He would have succumbed long ago. In the dull, cheerless garden overlooked by so many windows that were ready to open with a message not to do this or that, or a reminder that medicines were due, he found little attraction. The few fruit trees it contained were set jealously apart from his plucking, as though they were rare specimens of their kind, blooming in an arid waste. It would probably have been difficult to find a market gardener who would have offered 10 shillings for their entire yearly produce. In a forgotten corner, however, almost hidden behind a dismal shrubbery, was a disused tool shed of respectable proportions, and within its walls Conradin found a haven, something that took on the varying aspects of a playroom and a cathedral. And the story is that he ends up, according to Layla, because I haven't had a chance to read all of it, ends up killing Mrs. de Ropp. And the way she described it was so powerful, both Hannah and I were a bit gobsmacked. And then I said, "Well, what about the last book?" And she said, "That's The Bath by Janet Frame." We often entertain this romantic and sentimental assumption that old age is a time of peace and happiness. After a whole life devoted to work and the family, it's a time to enjoy the full benefits of one's hard work and efforts. In The Bath, however, New Zealand writer Janet Frame reverses this interpretation and uncompromisingly explores the terror and the torture of old age. It's 17 years since this old woman is managing on her own after her husband's death. Each year she makes it a point to go to the graveyard to place flowers on the tombstone. But the journey is a real problem. In a few concrete details, Frame charts her mental state: the walk to the bus stop, the change of buses, the bitter wind, the tiredness. Each works against her, exerting demands she finds increasingly awesome, so much so that there's a death wish on her part. She longs to find a place beside the graves. I'm turning 50 in a week's time, and I certainly found that a little bit very powerfully described by Layla, and she was describing the bath with the yellow ring, the yellow stain, how difficult it was to get herself out of it, and very powerful in the description. Hannah said to me after all of this, because we're also gripped by the narration. What about the scramble for Africa? And I said, well, look, we'll have to get to that tonight. Sarah Wells flew into foggy London. Views are beautiful. This is the Shard and all the towers in the sky. Lived for so many years in that city. Loved it. And then look at this. Fog shrouds top of St. Paul's Cathedral. That was from the Telegraph. Went back to Nassim Taleb because somebody was talking about out-of-the-box thinking on Twitter. They are born, then put in a box. They go home to live in a box. They study by ticking boxes. They go to what is called work in a box, where they sit in their cubicle box. They drive to the grocery in a box to buy food in a box. They go to the gym in a box to sit in a box. They talk about thinking outside the box. And when they die, they are put in a box called boxes. Euclidean, geometrically smooth boxes. Political reflections. I learnt yesterday a record 218,394 migrants fled across the Mediterranean Sea in October, more than in all of last year. The United Nations Refugee Agency said the figure was up from 172,843 the previous month, and from 23,050 in October 2014. That's a classic description of something going off the charts. To date this year there have been 744,175 arrivals by sea, with Greece and Italy as the main gateways into the European Union. The majority, 53%, came from war-torn Syria, followed by 18% from Afghanistan and 6% from Iraq. Another 3,440 people died or went missing during the crossings, many of which were made on unseaworthy vessels. When we were coming back from one of the islands to Mahe on Saturday night, we were in the dark. It left at 6:45. We got in about 7, or 6:30. We got in about 7:30. And it was seriously choppy. We were in a really quite expensive machine, 3 floors, that kind of thing, you'd find in Istanbul. Later on, I think we all started thinking, my goodness, can you imagine being in the Mediterranean, winter setting on in a dinghy, and we were in a ferry carrying about 1,000 people. Anyway, it's really a terrible tragedy, and it's off the charts, and the scenes are like something out of the Old Testament. Found this photograph of the Milky Way over the Mediterranean Sea by Albena Markova. And then an interesting piece in the Wall Street Journal about a new chapter of the migrant crisis is building on Africa's Mediterranean coast. And we've forgotten about that as the world watches hundreds of thousands of Syrians crossing into Europe from the east. Territories north of the Sahara are filling with comparable numbers of Africans determined to make their own entrance. Migrants from more than a dozen African nations are descending on Morocco, Algeria, Libya in unprecedented numbers, sleeping in abandoned apartments, derelict warehouses, and on city streets. Thousands are living in fast-expanding forest encampments, surviving off garbage and stolen water. Here we're like ghosts. Nobody sees us or considers us, and we're not productive, said 23-year-old Bamba, university dropout from Ivory Coast, who's failed 4 times to reach Spain. We can't advance and we can't go home. For us, it's Europe or die. Behind the wave of migrants crashing to Europe lurks another story. The Mediterranean shore of Africa is becoming a vast waiting room for the record numbers who fall short. This Sinai plane crash, the company is saying that an external factor caused the crash. The Russian airline Kogalmavia has blamed external activity for Saturday's deadly Sinai plane crash, which killed 224 people. The speculation is around whether a manpad could have fired it, could have brought it down. That's A Director General said the only reasonable explanation is that it was due to external activity. A previous tail strike in 2001 was repaired fully. The company said a Kremlin spokesman has told the BBC terrorism could not be ruled out as a possible cause of the crash. On the 25th of August, admittedly writing about MH370, I said since then planes have been falling out of the sky like flies. the 7K 9268 disaster, apparently 16 people cancelled their flight the day before. And then I came across this article by Eric Margolis, who says the US and China are playing with matches. Russian and US warplanes are flying way too close to one another over Syria and Iraq. Over Syria and may soon in Iraq. Drones are all over the place. An accident is inevitable. Civilian airliners are increasingly at risk over the Middle East. Clapper, who's head of national intelligence in the US, said it's unlikely, but I wouldn't rule it out, talking about a possible terrorist attack. Too weak, too strong, Patrick Coburn on the state of the Syrian war, saying the military balance of power in Syria and Iraq is changing. Russian airstrikes that have been taking place since the end of September are strengthening and raising the morale of the Syrian army, which early in the year looked fought out and was on the retreat. The chances of Bashar al-Assad's government falling, though always more remote than many suggested, are disappearing. Not that this means he's going to win. Then he says Syrian opposition was rescued by Saudi Arabia, Qatar and Turkey in 2014, and this year Assad has been saved by Russia, Iran and Hezbollah. All have too much to lose. Russia needs success in Syria after 20 years of retreat, while the Shia states dare not allow a Sunni triumph. The military stalemate will be difficult to break. The battleground is vast, with front lines stretching from Iran to the Mediterranean. South Sea patrols no threat. This is the US Admiral in Beijing. Described China's island-building efforts as creating a great wall of sand. The Nasdaq 100 index closed at the highest level since 2000. Let me just go through the currency markets. Euro 110.21, dollar index 96.86, Japanese yen 120.61, Swissy 0.9868, the pound 154.35. The Aussies had a good session today, 0.7202. That's after a no change decision. India rupee 64.435. South Korean 111.3286. The Real 387.32. Egyptian pound 802.89 and the rand 13.75. Supporting the dollar right now are futures traders who put the chance of a US rate increase in December, which is the last meeting of 2015, at 50%, up from 33% a month ago. I think raising it in December is a tricky thing because markets are thinner then, and you will only amplify possible moves. And I think, on that basis alone, I would have thought that it's not likely, and I would prefer to be selling 50% in the run-up to that decision. Euro dollar, let me put up a 3-month chart. Lots of the bonds, short-dated bonds in particular, in negative territory, and that's putting pressure on the euro for now. The Bloomberg Commodity Index fell 0.6% yesterday. Crude dropped from a 2-week high as Russian production climbed and Chinese numbers fueled concern over the outlook for demand. Gold is at a four-week low. You remember I said I stopped it out. And copper futures ended Monday little changed after falling in the previous 2 sessions. I'll put up a 6-month gold chart. We're below the key level of 1155. Let's see how we operate down here. Javier Blas, the battle for market share. Russia oil output hits post-Soviet record. You can see from his chart, crude oil last trading 46.59, and I think it's failed again to push on. 3.2% gain in the Turkish lira pushed it to the strongest level against the dollar since the end of July, while the Borsa Istanbul 100 index rallied 5.4%, the best performance among 93 primary equity benchmark indexes worldwide, and that's obviously on the pretty clear-cut victory for Erdogan. It certainly caught me off guard. The lira has rallied after a conclusive result. The November 1st election ended a period of political instability. Let's move on to Africa. All is set for President Museveni's nomination rally at Kololo Independence Grounds. Uganda decides. This was really a decision which was made a long time ago. African economies are unable to absorb millions of young Africans entering the labour force each year. This is Kaizi Mugerwa from the African Development Bank, and this is Democratic dividend versus time bomb. There is an argument to be made then that President Zuma thrives in chaos, the terrible logic of Jacob Zuma's chaos machine. For example, brutal political turnover works in his favour. He has reshuffled his executive 8 times since 2009. More than 100 changes in ministerial and deputy ministerial positions. There have been more than 120 changes in 7 years of directors general. The average career of a director general under Zuma is less than 16 months. There is an argument to be made that Zuma thrives in chaos. The relentless merry-go-round at senior management and executive level means no one is ever comfortable, and everyone's allegiance is first and foremost to the president, for fear they will be pushed off the ride or in the hope they will be invited to join it. In a recent interview, former DA leader Tony Leon said, "I was told by an ANC National Executive Committee member that of the ANC National Executive Committee, only about 9 people out of 96, or however many there are, but around 10% of them, are independent of the President's powers of appointment for their monthly salaries." The ANC has never been weaker, and President Zuma has never been stronger. I think the students probably represent the biggest clear and present danger to President Zuma, and put up a photograph of him arriving in New Delhi to participate in the 3rd India-Africa Forum Summit. And Julius Malema on that point about the students said the students have achieved what COSATU was unable to achieve in 20 years, saying that he was retweeting somebody, proving that the COSATU is irrelevant. South African all-share firm 0.12% yesterday. It's up 8.22% year to date. But what was interesting is that it achieved that given that MTN was suspended at one point. The suspension of MTN followed a report by the Nigerian newspaper Vanguard on Monday claiming the telecoms giant had bowed to pressure and agreed to pay the full $5.2 billion fine leveled against it by the Nigerian Communications Commission. And given that move lower, at one point it was down 8%, I'm surprised that the South African all-share managed to eke out a gain. Dollar Rand, I'll put up a 3-month chart. We're in no man's land. We're in 13, 14 range. We'll see how it behaves. Egyptian pound above 8 at 802. Egyptian stock market down 16.71% year to date. Compare that to South Africa, which is up 8.22%. I like this photograph of President Goodluck Jonathan visiting President Muhammadu Buhari at the ASO Rock Villa in Abuja. The Nigerian all-share is down 15.93% year to date. This caught my attention. It's worrying the bank fines, the telecommunications fines. Chap from Nigeria. I don't get the sense that what the economic direction is. If Nigeria is broken, agencies are finding companies to make up for the shortfall in oil revenues, then that is something that we should be worried about. Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index down 10.91% year to date. Mozambique has turned to the IMF for $286 million in emergency aid to help cushion the economy. Metical has slumped 29% against the dollar this year, second worst performer after the Zambian kwacha. IMF is learned subject to approval by the board, saying the economic outlook for Mozambique has worsened this year, with credit rating companies having punished the unwise issuance of the 2013 $850 million Maputo bond with sovereign downgrades. And then on another note, Mozambique's armed forces will continue a campaign to disarm forces loyal to the main opposition party until we have removed the last nest of fighters. This is the Interior Minister Jaime Montero. Government forces clashed within the last 10 days with RENAMO fighters near the town of Vanduzi and in Morambala district in the centre of the country. It's a game of brinkmanship whose trajectory could turn sharply south on a dime. I'll put up a photograph of Maputo from the sea. Just going back to our Eurobond, which was listed at a yield of 6.62% in June 2014, that's now at 7.98%. Last price 93.21, the high has been 105.14, the low 88.50. I touched on the Eurobond on the 26th of October when I spoke about the Eurobond and investor relations. Do have a look at that. I was saying, when you sell $2.75 billion worth of bonds to international investors, you're essentially ceding sovereignty over the pricing of your credit to the buyers. They are pricing us on a real-time and continuous basis, and I said therefore there was a task here, an investor relations task, because there's been a lot of uncertainty and hullabaloo on social media particularly. It's funny that it's remained localized for now. It looks to me, given by the questions I'm being asked of late, that it's about to go international. If they don't like what they're hearing, or are hearing nothing at all, I said then we'd seem to have entered a black hole in this regard. They're going to sell bonds and ask questions, sell our bonds and ask questions later. And then I was saying the other audiences, people here on the ground. Kenya shilling is at 102, the figure. Nairobi all share is down 15.94% this year, and just 0.89% above its 2015 closing low. NAC 20 closed at a 39-month low. That's down 24.56%. Shilling held steady yesterday. As I said, the Nairobi all share eased 0.25%. NAC 20 closed down 12.08 points. Volume very, very low, just around $2 million. And I said, the stock market has been struck by a double whammy. The shilling and an ultra-high interest rate posture. The shilling is now stabilized, and an easing of the interest rate structure will see the equity market find its footing, I think. Sasini T rallied 4.79%, strong showing. Safaricom closed unchanged, 14.35, but consider that they are releasing results on Thursday morning. Badly oversold, I think. WPP, which had retreated 47.5% in 2015, rebounded 7.36% yesterday. Banks Equity Group traded at more than 50% of the volume at the stock exchange. Equity trades on a trailing PE of 9. And accelerated Q3 2015 earnings per share 11.88%. KCB closed at 39.75. Trailing PE of 7.06, and earnings per share up 10% through Q3. I think it's a big buy, actually. And what was really interesting was growth in the regional subsidiaries, which grew at eye-popping 74%. And consider South Sudan, consider Uganda, where they cited it as being slow, Burundi, and they're now opening a regional office in Ethiopia. Kenya Power took a big hit, down 6.67% at 14. There's been a big and negative campaign on social media, which informs us of social media's new price, cause and effect. Arm Cement currently undertaking an investor roadshow. They are seeking to sell a multi-currency bond firmed at 2.08%. If you need to track the stock market, just log on to rich.co.ke, register, it's free, get a password. Log in with your username and password at Rich Live, and you can follow the market in real time. Once again, thank you for stopping by.